Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Thursday and welcome. Welcome to the EQ Lab. If this is your first time here, I know we had several new members join our group in the last few days. There's been quite a flurry of activity actually this week, has been super busy. So if it is your first time here inside our amazing private Facebook community, I want to personally welcome you. I am Dr. Shyamala. I am the creator of the EQ Lab, and I am a podcast host. I am a media expert for national TV. I have practiced as a psychotherapist and a couple and family therapist for nearly 2 decades. And now I am absolutely passionate about helping high-performing women just like you truly transform their relationships by learning how to access and execute the emotional intelligence skills that really allow us to show up as our best selves, that allow us to show up with courage and integrity. So I am so glad that you are here. If you have been hanging out here for a little while, you know what's about to go down. This is the EQ Skills Clinic. It is a free weekly live teaching that I do every single Thursday inside this group. And if you are catching the replay, as I know that most of you do, will you give me a hashtag replay in the comments? Will you throw your favorite emoji into the comments so that I know that you are watching and you are tracking and you are learning and you are transforming your relationships? I'm so glad that you're here. And I want you to stay right up until the end of today's session. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, give you a few more details about the amazing live training and coaching event that we have going on that starts on Monday. We have some awesome prizes that we're going to be doing this time, including a fully paid scholarship to my signature coaching program. This is my private coaching program just for women, and we are going to be giving away one fully paid scholarship to that program. So if any of that interests you, please do stay until the end. I'm just going to jump into my comments here. So if you have not seen a skills clinic in a little while, we have shifted the format just a little bit so that it's super clear what we're talking about. You've got the topic just below the video here. We're going to be talking communication skills, but the format has shifted. It is a different platform. And so if it is your first time joining me using this particular platform, you will need to give StreamYard, which is the platform that I am using, you'll need to give StreamYard permission to comment, because I absolutely love your comments. Your comments totally fuel me and they light me up. So please do not be afraid to comment, whether it's live or the replay. Just make sure that you give StreamYard permission, your permission to do that. Your name does not show up. It's just your comments. So I would love to hear from you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So awesome to see you here. All right, so let's jump into today's teaching. We are talking about communication skills today. And of all of the emotional intelligence skills that I teach, communication skills is my absolute favorite thing to teach. It's my favorite thing to coach around. It's my favorite thing to really, like when I'm working with women, I absolutely get in a zone when we get into a conversation and when we get into a coaching scenario, and we're really trying to distill down the elements of high performance communication. And it's it's a set of skills. There's such a beautiful, powerful set of skills to have and to really embody. And so one of the things that I want you to think about as we move through today's teaching is that these skills that we learn here inside the EQ Lab, they're not, for me, I don't want these skills to be something that is external to you. Okay. I don't want you to think about these skills as something that is out there that you're picking up and you're using and you're executing on. My ultimate goal when I am working with my clients and when I'm working inside of this community, my ultimate goal is that what happens is that you begin to embody these skills. They become a part of you, right? You begin to actually integrate these skills into your identity. So if you're watching this and you want to integrate the skills into your identity, I want you to throw that into the comments. I want you to throw into the comments identity integration. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to just integrate these pieces into our identity. So what ends up happening is more and more often, it becomes natural and normative for us to execute and for us to access these skills. It just kind of becomes part of who we are. It becomes part of the fabric of how we relate to others. So we're talking communication skills, and I've got my notes over here. That's why I'm looking over to the side. And we're talking specifically about emotion regulation, right? We're talking specifically about why and how emotion regulation truly is the foundation of better conversations. So what I'm going to teach you today is essentially how to use your ability to regulate your emotions to really practice the art and science of better conversations. So here's the first thing that I want you to know. The first thing I want you to that I want to share with you and that I want you to really take in is that when we are emotionally regulated, that is the time where we are able to show up as our best selves in our conversations. What do I mean by that? Being emotionally regulated, allows us to have clarity. It allows us to have integrity in our conversations. It allows us to access the assertive style of communication versus some of the more problematic styles of communication. Sorry, I got something in my throat here. So emotion regulation really does become that foundational piece. It becomes that pillar of emotional intelligence that we always want to make sure that we are accessing as we move into really any type of conversation, whether that is, a conversation about something really exciting and really positive, or whether it's a difficult conversation. We want to always be thinking about emotion regulation as that foundational pillar. So when we're emotionally dysregulated, what ends up happening in a conversation is that we're actually unable to bring our best self to that particular moment. And that's how I want you to think about your conversations, right? Conversations are simply interactions that happen between usually at least two people, maybe two or more people, and they happen in a particular moment, right? So a conversation, I don't want you to think about conversations as conversations are always an opportunity to necessarily resolve something. They're not always there for problem solving. They're not always there to come to an agreement or to come to a solution. But I want you to think about conversations as more of a fluid sort of concept, where conversations happen as an interaction between at least two or more people in a particular moment. So when we're emotionally dysregulated, we're unable to bring our best selves to that particular moment. We're unable to show up with clarity. We're unable to show up with compassion. We're unable to show up with openness. We're unable to show up with transparency when we get stuck in being emotionally dysregulated. So when we're flooded with emotion, which is the opposite of being emotionally regulated, when we're flooded with emotion, a few things happen to us. A few things sort of automatically happen and kind of take over our senses when we are dysregulated. Number one, the first thing that happens is our negative interpretation of facial expressions and tone of voice intensifies. I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to unpack it a little bit, right? So the very first thing that happens when we are emotionally flooded is that we interpret facial expressions, we interpret tone of voice differently. And differently, like in a bad way, not a good way, right? So typically what happens is we have this a more intensified negative interpretation of body language, facial expression, and tone of voice. We can become very, very sensitive. So Krista says, yes, identity integration is life-changing, anxiety reducing, and so important for continued growth. Yes, absolutely, right? And so this is how we want to be thinking about all of these skills, right? So let me move back here to the piece around being flooded with emotion. The first thing that happens is think about it. When we're flooded with emotion, we view, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, perhaps even the content of what that other person is saying, and we view it through a negative lens, perhaps through a critical lens, right? So that's the first thing that can happen. The second thing that happens is our ability to think with clarity decreases. So when we are, and I just want you to think about this for yourself, because I know this happens to me for sure. When I am emotionally flooded, when I'm flooded with emotion, I'm overwhelmed. It's like I've been taken over by my emotions, right? My face gets hot, my heart races. I can like, it's like I feel like I can feel the emotions like in the pit of my stomach. When that happens, it's very, very difficult for me to think with clarity. So that's the second thing that happens. So number one, our ability to actually interpret facial expression and tone of voice, um, like in sort of a neutral way, really decreases, and our negative interpretation of those things intensifies. The second thing that happens is our ability to think with clarity decreases, right? We're not able to access that more rational part of our brain. And then the third thing that happens is our ability to listen attentively decreases. Our ability to actually take in the words that are being spoken to us actually decreases. We're not able to listen attentively. We're not able to be present. We're not able to be fully engaged in that conversation, right? We get stuck. Guess where we get stuck? We get stuck up here, right? We get stuck in our own thoughts. We get stuck in our own perspective. We get stuck in our own interpretation of what we think is going on. We get stuck often in old narratives that are probably not serving us. But these old narratives, this toxic sort of perspective, becomes the lens through which we're viewing the conversation. And I want to point something out if you hadn't noticed. I shared with you three things in particular just now that happen to us when we are not emotionally regulated, particularly during a conversation. And I want you to notice that not one of these things has anything to do with us opening our mouth. Right? So the three things that I just taught you that happen to us when we are emotionally dysregulated have absolutely, like, you haven't even opened your mouth yet, right? We're talking communication skills. And what I'm teaching you and what I want you to really think about is that communication starts up here, right? It starts with our mindset. It starts with our perspective. It starts with our cognitive structure. It starts with how our brain is wired to think. And so if we're starting with a negative perspective, if we're starting with faulty communication patterns or faulty relationship templates, we're going to set ourselves up to have an even more difficult conversation. So that's the first thing I sort of just want you to pay attention to and be aware of as we move through the rest of the teaching. So, in order to actually be fully engaged, in order to be fully present, and to have clarity in our conversations, it's really important that we have a regular practice that invites us into a calm space in our daily lives. So, we want to have, and I say this a lot, right? That at the end of the day, our ability to access and execute the emotional intelligence skills that are so critical for us, it's going to require that we have practices, rituals, and pockets of time in our own lives where we are able to self-regulate, where we're able to find that calm, where we're able to find that clarity, and really sort of those centering, those grounding sorts of exercises. And this couldn't be more true even for my own life, right? I often say, I've been interviewed for a few different like podcasts and things like that this week, and one of the questions that I almost always get asked when I'm doing an interview is, what are the practices that you have in your life, right? Like, how do you practice showing up as your best self? How do you practice, executing on these skills? And almost always my answer to that question is I have daily practices in my life. One of my daily practices is I really like to wake up before everybody else in my house. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes the dog is the first one up and he wakes me up with his whining and his crying. But I do like to be the first human, let's put it that way. I like to be the first human that is awake in my house so that I can give myself some time. Right? I can pour into myself. I can practice that self-care at the start of my day. And for me, one of the best ways that I practice self-care is through movement, is through exercise. Today was a very busy morning. Got in 20 minutes on my bike. And that's all I needed. I just needed a moment to just breathe and let my thoughts process, and sweat and drink some water. And that for me is one of those daily practices that allows me to then intentionally move through the rest of my day with some clarity. And then I've got other elements that I throw in throughout the day as well. But I want you to think about just having some practices in your life that would invite you into a space of calm. So now I want to share with you and I want to teach you, how do we foster calmness and clarity as we navigate our relationships? So if we're talking communication skills today, how do we then take our ability to remain emotionally self-regulated, our ability to practice that self-care, and how does that translate? How do we then move that into our relationships and our conversations? So I'm going to give you 3 tips for that right now. You may want to jot some of these down. So the first one is be very, very selective about when you choose to have difficult conversations. Be very selective about this. I was the absolute worst. This was me in the past. I've learned from my mistakes, and I want you to learn from my mistakes. If a thought occurred to me where I was like, I need to have this conversation. I need to tell, my sister this, or I need to tell my husband that, or I need to have this conversation. I had a very hard time hanging on to that and thinking about when would be an appropriate time to have that conversation. What I would do is I would need to have that conversation immediately. And that often got me in a lot of trouble. It certainly allowed those conversations to go sideways. So I want you to think about being really selective about when you choose to have difficult conversations, and selective on both ends. Like, when is a good time for you? When are you most likely to be able to remain calm, clear, confident, all of those things in a difficult conversation? When might be the best time for that other person, right? And that requires, again, it requires that self-regulation, right? Because we need to slow down in order to be able to think critically and to make a decision, to make an informed, intentional decision around when we're having these difficult conversations. And it's such a marker of emotional maturity. It's such a marker of maturity as a woman and how we move through our relationships. I think that ability to say, okay, this is really bothering me. I'm feeling this. I want to have this conversation right now. And to be able to say, I'm going to slow down, take some deep breaths. I'm going to hang on to this for just a moment. And I'm actually going to think a little more strategically in terms of when is the best time. So you want to pick a time when you're not stressed, when you're not tired, and when you're not irritable. You also want to really give consideration to what is going on in that other person's life that you want to have this difficult conversation with, right? My husband immediately comes to mind, right? Is I often think about his work schedule. He does shift work. I have learned the hard way not to have a difficult conversation with him when he's come off of a bunch of night shifts. The absolute worst time to have a difficult conversation with him. I'm setting myself up, I'm setting him up, I'm setting the relationship up for failure, really, if I choose to have difficult conversation during those times. So be really, really selective. That's my very first tip. The second tip I have for you is to get crystal clear on the purpose of the conversation. I want to stay here for a moment because this is really important. You're going to get crystal clear on the purpose. The purpose of the conversation is not always the same as your ask. I often talk about getting clear on what it is that you are asking for. That's not what I mean here. I mean, why are you having the conversation? What is the reason you are wanting to have this conversation? Are you asking for something? Or are you simply sharing something? Those are two different things. And how you want to begin that conversation and how you want to engage in that conversation is going to be different, right? So, what is the purpose, the reason that you are wanting to have this conversation? Do you have an ask, or do you simply want to share something? You want to make sure that you let the other person know what you hope to do in that conversation, right? So many times I work with women that tell me, I just wanted to vent to my partner. I just wanted to share with him or her what happened in my day. And then next thing I know, she or he, like, they're giving me solutions. They're just giving me solutions and that's not what I wanted, Shyamala. I didn't want solutions. I didn't want advice. I simply wanted to talk, and I simply wanted to feel heard, and I simply wanted to be validated. And then maybe I'm ready for solutions, right? So you need to first get super clear on your reason for having the conversation. And then I would encourage you to communicate that reason to the other person. My third tip is the one that I struggled with the most, and I still struggle with this one the most. And it's also the tip that has given me the most success in changing my communication style. So it's like a two-sided coin for me. It's still hard for me. It's still so hard. But I keep practicing this one because it goes such a long way. And it's to slow down. It's to slow down. If you know me at all, if you've spent any time with me, even if you listen to the cadence of my voice when I speak, I move quick. I move quick. My husband's nickname for me, I'm going to share something very, very personal with you, is Rabbit. Rabbit, like a bunny rabbit, Rabbit. He started calling me that when we were dating. Because when we met and when we were dating, I was doing my doctorate. I was working part-time in nonprofit as a therapist. I was teaching like 6 fitness classes a week. I was on the move. Rabbit was on the move. I was like, boom, 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 right? Like just always moving quickly through life. Always moving quickly through my thoughts, even always moving quickly through conversations, through challenges, through difficulties, through everything. Like I only had 2 like paces. It was like go or stop. There was nothing in between. And so the idea of slowing down is difficult for me. And I know for many of the women that I work with, the idea of slowing down could be difficult for you as well, right? You might be used to moving at a really fast pace. And what happens when we're used to moving at such a fast pace is we're also used to always being focused on the outcome, always being focused on what's the result that I'm going for, what is the end result of this particular situation or conversation. And the problem with that is that when we don't slow down, we don't actually give that other person an opportunity, a fair opportunity to engage in that conversation from where they are. And everyone's at a different spot, right? So sometimes I come to an issue or a concern and I have a particular perspective and I've been, thinking about it for some time. And then I might bring it to, let's say, my partner or my mom or my sister, whoever it is. I bring it to that other person, and this is the first time they've even thought about it, right? And we may have this expectation that they're going to move quickly with us through this particular concern, this particular issue, and be just as motivated as we are to find a resolution. And that's not always the case, right? It's not always the case. So my third tip that I am still working on, and I hope that you'll work on it as well, is to slow down, right? So the issue, the concern, the problem, the whatever it is, does not need to be resolved in one conversation. My friend, I'm going to say that to you again. And as I say it to you, I'm saying it to myself because I was notorious for being like, this is a one closed conversation. We're going to start this conversation. We're going to end it. There's going to be a resolution. Let's put it in a contract and let's carry on. Right? I'm so curious if this, like, if anyone can relate to this. I'm seeing Maria, Krista, I'm seeing your comments here, right? This whole idea of like, let's just get it done. Let's get her done, right? And often I think, particularly as high achieving, ambitious women, we can treat our personal relationships the way that we treat our professional relationships. You know, when I get on a meeting, let's say with a team member, right? There's usually a set time. We have, you know, an agenda. We have a list of things to accomplish. So we're like, boom, 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 done. Right? It's not the same in our personal lives, and it shouldn't be the same in our personal lives, right? Our personal lives get to be different from our professional lives, right? We get to have and choose a different pace in our personal lives. And so, one of the things I really want you to think about is, in order to slow down, you've got to embrace this concept and this idea that, let me go back to my notes here. I want to make sure I say it clearly to you, is that the problem does not need to be resolved in one conversation. And in fact, I want you to think about the idea that the most generative aspects of our relationships, and what I mean by generative are the aspects of our relationship that have the potential to really foster the greatest sense of intimacy. Those are often the areas that change slowly over time, right? So the areas where we feel like we have the opportunity to experience the greatest depths and richness of intimacy, emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, physical intimacy in our relationships, are often the areas that shift slowly over time. And in order to be able to do that, we really need to be able to, you know, make some space, come back to the topic, have several conversations, leave room for those conversations. And over time, you will be able to foster a greater sense of intimacy. And you know, I often share very transparently, like, first of all, my personal communication style, like, guys, if I wish I could do like a before and after, it has shifted. I can't believe how much it has shifted over the last, I don't know, eight years, something like that, you know. And it's so, I can't even put a time to it because it's been such a slow change and such a slow shift. And if I think back, my gosh, when I think back to how I used to try to resolve issues with my husband in those early days, I kind of cringe. I'm like, oh my gosh, how were you even a therapist and you thought that that was a good way to resolve anything at all, right? Like, and it was my emotional dysregulation, it was my anxiety that would drive me to become really controlling, right? And it was my anxiety and the fear that I felt of not having my needs met that would drive me to even be manipulative. And not because I'm this evil person, but I came to understand that when that fear, that anxiety is really big, we make choices that are not in integrity with who we are, right? So, anyway, long story short, that shift for me happened slowly and with practice and over time. And when I think back to some of those early conversations and some of those early challenges that my husband and I had, and how I approached it back then, and as I, you know, learned that that really doesn't work, and I began trying these different strategies that I now teach. But as I began trying these different strategies in terms of communicating and connecting and all of those sorts of things, and I saw the shift, one of the greatest things now that I am able to use inside of my own marriage is to simply feel empowered enough to share my thoughts, my feelings, my needs, my opinions, my desires, calmly and clearly and with confidence, to really have let go of that outcome. And often how those conversations go for me now is I simply share and I will say, and I'm going to leave that with you. Like, I'm going to leave, I don't actually need a response from you. I don't like, sit with it, think about it. And that is a huge shift from how those conversations used to go for me, because I would have never said, think about it. I would have never said, we'll come back to this. I would have never said, I'm going to leave that with you, right? I would have been so anxious that I would have needed to know right in that moment, what do you think? And can we do this? And are you okay with this? And if you're not, then I'm going to give you 5 more reasons why you should be, right? So it was a huge shift, but it took time. And interestingly enough, some of the issues that my partner and I have disagreed on, some of them we still disagree on, okay? And that's okay. I'll do a whole other teaching on disagreement and how that's totally okay in a relationship. But some of those issues that we disagreed on, years and years ago, they have slowly began to show, we've come closer together, right? Not all of them. I don't want to paint this picture that, now we agree on everything. We don't. We're very different people, my partner and I. But we've come closer and closer together. But I'll tell you, I truly believe that would not have happened in an intimacy building way had I continued to be as controlling as I was. If I continued to lead with fear, I can tell you that would have never happened. All right, I went into a little bit of a tangent story time there, but I want you to really think about these concepts. I want you to think about what you bring to a conversation, the level of emotion regulation that you bring to any difficult conversation is going to have a tremendous impact on your ability to use those difficult places in your life, those difficult conversations in any relationship to really build intimacy. I'm just going to jump in here. I've gone a little over what I normally go, but I just want to jump in and see some of the comments. Emotion, identity integration, emotion regulation helps us bring our best self to our interactions. Absolutely. Yes, I've walked away from an argument wishing that I'd kept my cool or held back the tears. Learning the skill of emotion regulation has improved my communication and ability to have difficult conversations without shutting down. Yes. Maria, as a mom of a young teen, I can relate to that so much. Yeah, it's amazing how much I use these skills now. Maria, as a mom too, I just find as my daughter gets older, I need to access these skills more and more. Krista says, my emotional regulation is almost always dysregulated when I feel rushed. Yep, me too, especially in the morning. I need to set myself up for success the night before. Coffee pot set, breakfast prepped, clothes set out. Oh, I know. I love setting the clothes out the night before. School bags packed. Maria, yes, you can absolutely relate to this. Krista, guilty. Krista, 3 tips. Oh, great. Awesome. Krista has thrown the tips in there for you guys. Yep, nothing needs to be resolved in one conversation. Maria feels called out. Listen, every time I call one of you guys out, I am totally calling. The reason I know how to call this stuff out is because I've done it all. I have done it all, my friends. I have done it all, not just with romantic relationships, but as a mom. Yeah, I've had my oldest son, who is great at communicating, tell me to remember that they're not a client. I know. I've had my husband tell me that. He's like, can you just stop being a therapist right now and just be my wife? So I totally get that. All right, my friends, thank you so much. I want to remind you that the Courageous Intimacy Bootcamp starts on Monday. I'm so, so, so excited to spend the whole week with you live every single day, teaching, coaching, training, and really going deep on how do we show up with courage and with integrity in our relationships. There are a couple of things I want you to be aware of. Number one, if you know of another high-performing woman who could really benefit from this level of advanced training when it comes to mindset and communication skills, I want you to invite her. I want you to invite a friend, 2 friends, 3 friends. For every friend that you refer to the Courageous Intimacy Bootcamp, we will enter your name into a draw to win a complimentary one-to-one implementation session with me during our boot camp. You and I will work together one-to-one, and I'm going to help you to implement the strategies that you are learning inside the boot camp. This is really and truly the absolute most effective way to move your goals forward when it comes to this specific training and this specific boot camp. So that's the first thing. That we have 3 opportunities to do that, right? So we are going to give 3 people, we're going to draw 3 names, an opportunity to win a one-to-one implementation session. The second thing that we are doing that I'm so excited to do, especially during this crazy time that we are in globally and everything that's going on, is we are going to be giving away one fully paid membership to my signature program, which is called the EQ Code. The EQ Code is literally an immersive incubator for high-performing women that really want to learn, practice, execute, and embody the emotional intelligence skills that we all need in order to move our relationships forward. So if you are interested in working with me in a deep, immersive, and intimate way, it is my absolute favorite thing to do in the entire world is to work with women inside of the EQ Code. If it sounds like something that you might be interested in accessing on the scholarship, I want you to make sure, number one, that you are enrolled for the Courageous Intimacy Bootcamp. Make sure that you're inviting your friends. And once we kick off the boot camp, my team and I will let you know exactly what you need to do in order to be entered into that draw to win that scholarship. All right, friends, if you got any questions, any comments, let me know. Otherwise, I may not see you again until Monday. I might pop back in here at some point. But if I don't see you before then, I will see you Monday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Courageous Intimacy Bootcamp.